Hey there, friend. Welcome to a story crafted not for adventure, but for profound tranquility. Slow down and let the quiet details wash over you. Don't forget to subscribe for more calm moments. Tonight, we begin an exploration of a process as old as humanity itself, one that has unfolded with large progression. The evolution of transport. We will delve into methods devised to move from one point to another, tracing a path filled with specific details and recurring actions designed to gently guide you towards rest. Imagine, if you will, the earliest human needs that prompted movement across the landscape. These were not driven by sudden urges for grand exploration, but by the consistent and unchanging requirements for sustenance and survival. The predictable movements of animals, the seasonal availability of plants, and the unchanging patterns of water sources necessitated a gradual, purposeful displacement. Early humans moved to find food, to access clean water, and to seek shelter from predictable environmental elements. This was not a spontaneous wanderlust, but a methodical response to fundamental, unchanging needs. The earliest form of transport was simply walking. This method involved the rhythmic alternation of human limbs, a consistent sequence of steps repeated countless times over distances. Early humans traversed diverse landscapes on foot, their movements dictated by the terrain and their physical capabilities. This was a persistent, step-by-step progression across plains, through forests, and over gentle hills. The sounds of footsteps, a soft, consistent rhythm on the ground, would have defined their daily existence. As possessions accumulated, the next development was carrying. Early humans transported tools, gathered food, and offspring by hand, or by simple methods to distribute weight. Imagine bundling items in animal skins or woven baskets, balanced on the head or shoulders. This was an extension of walking, with the added consistent effort of supporting a load. The steady rhythm of carrying would have been a consistent feature of their movements, a testament to enduring physical exertion. The use of human chains might have emerged for transporting larger or heavier objects, such as logs or large game. This involved multiple individuals coordinating efforts, each contributing a portion of force to move an object over a distance. The collective effort, guided by simple vocalizations or rhythmic chants, ensured the steady movement of cumbersome items. This was an application of combined human power, achieving tasks too large for an individual. Movement across water also began with simple methods. Early humans observed floating logs and gradually learned to use them for crossing small bodies of water. This evolved into rafts, constructed by lashing together multiple logs or bundles of reeds. The gentle drift of a raft on a river, propelled by simple poles or currents, was one of the first aquatic transport experiences. The rhythmic dipping of poles or the soft lapping of water against the raft contributed to the sensation of these early journeys. The creation of dugout canoes, hollowed out from single tree trunks, represented a technological step. The process of hollowing a log with simple tools, often involving controlled burning and scraping, was painstaking and repetitive. Once completed, these canoes offered a stable form of water travel, allowing for longer journeys on rivers and sheltered coastlines. The consistent dip of a paddle pushing against the water provided a steady rhythm to their movement. The next major advancement in transport came with the domestication of animals, allowing humans to leverage animal power for movement and carrying loads. This was a gradual process of understanding animal behavior and training for specific tasks. The donkey, often one of the first animals to be domesticated for transport, provided a consistent source of power. Donkeys are known for their endurance and their ability to carry heavy loads over rough terrain for long distances. Imagine a line of donkeys, each laden with bundles, steadily traversing ancient trade routes. Their pace and unwavering nature made them ideal partners for early long-distance transport. The rhythmic sound of their hooves on dry earth would have marked their passage. The ox, a larger and stronger animal, was primarily used for pulling heavier loads, particularly in agriculture for plowing, but also for pulling carts. The powerful pull of an ox, harnessed to a simple wooden cart, enabled the movement of goods too heavy for human carrying. Their deliberate strength provided a reliable source of power for recurring tasks. The creak of wooden wheels moving steadily became a consistent sound in ancient landscapes. The camel, especially suited for arid environments, became a common mode of transport across deserts. Camels are adapted to long journeys with minimal water, capable of carrying substantial loads. Imagine a caravan of camels moving with a characteristic swaying gait across vast sand dunes, their pace consistent for days on end. Their ability to navigate challenging terrains made them important for long-distance trade across deserts. The soft thud of their large padded feet on sand would have been a primary sound for miles. The horse, while initially domesticated for various purposes, eventually became a crucial animal for faster overland travel. Horses offered greater speed and agility compared to donkeys or oxen. Imagine a rider on horseback moving at a consistent trot across the landscape, or a horse pulling a light cart or chariot. Their movements were within consistent parameters, relying on the horse's natural gait. The rhythmic clip-clop of hooves on packed earth added a new, consistent auditory element to transport. The use of pack animals allowed for the expansion of trade routes and the movement of goods over greater distances. This was a foundational step in developing more complex societies, as resources could be reliably transported from areas of abundance to areas of scarcity. The reliance on animal power introduced new rhythms and considerations into travel, always within the bounds of natural capabilities and consistent animal behavior. The invention of the wheel represents a fundamental step in the evolution of transport, altering the way humans and goods could move. This innovation, believed to have emerged in Mesopotamia around 3500 BCE, transformed the burden of dragging into the smoother, more efficient motion of rolling. The earliest wheels were simple,
solid wooden discs, often cut from tree trunks. Imagine a circular slice of wood rotating around a fixed axle. The initial concept was straightforward, reducing friction by converting sliding motion into rolling motion. This change in mechanics allowed for much heavier loads to be moved with less effort than dragging. The turning of these solid wheels, often with a creaking sound, marked the early days of wheeled transport. These wheels were soon incorporated into carts, simple two-wheeled vehicles or wagons, typically four-wheeled vehicles. A basic cart involved an axle connecting two wheels with a platform or basket mounted above. The design was functional, providing a stable base for transporting goods. The rhythmic rotation of the wheels, the steady progress across relatively flat terrain became a common sight in ancient civilizations. The consistent click-clack of cartwheels on unpaved roads would have been a characteristic sound of ancient commerce and agriculture. The development of the spoked wheel, appearing later, around 2000 BCE, represented a refinement. Instead of a solid disc, spokes radiated from a central hub to a rim. This design made wheels lighter and stronger, allowing for more efficient vehicles such as chariots. The symmetrical arrangement of spokes provided a consistent distribution of weight and strength, enhancing the wheel's performance. The lightened wheel allowed for a smoother, consistent rolling motion. The widespread adoption of wheeled vehicles led to the development of roads. While early paths were simply worn tracks, the need for smoother surfaces to facilitate wheel movement led to the construction of paved roads. Imagine flat stones laid methodically, one after another, creating a consistent surface for travel. The consistent click-clack of cartwheels on these paved surfaces would have offered a uniform rhythm to journeys. The principle of the wheel, simple and unchanging, became the foundation for almost all subsequent forms of land transport. Its motion, converting linear effort into efficient rolling, allowed for the systematic movement of increasing volumes of goods and people, shaping the development of civilizations without ever introducing an element of surprise into its fundamental operation. While land transport evolved with wheels and animals, the waterways offered a naturally smooth path for movement, leading to a steady development of water transport technologies. The flow of rivers and the expanse of lakes and oceans influenced the design of early vessels. The earliest forms of water transport began with simple logs or rafts. These buoyant platforms relied on the principles of flotation and displacement. Imagine a raft gently drifting with the current of a river, its movement consistent, guided by occasional pushes with a pole. The soft lapping of water against the wood and the gentle sway of the vessel would have contributed to the sensation of these early journeys. The development of the dugout canoe, meticulously hollowed from a single tree trunk, represented a step towards more controlled water movement. The long, narrow shape of the canoe provided stability and allowed for propulsion with paddles, a rhythmic, repetitive action. The consistent dip and pull of the paddle through the water Moving the canoe steadily forward created a rhythm for travel on calm rivers and lakes. Their consistent maneuverability allowed for steady exploration of inland waterways.
As needs expanded, so did the size and complexity of watercraft, always following principles of naval architecture. The invention of the sail, a device that harnesses the force of the wind, marked a significant leap. Early sails were simple square or triangular pieces of fabric, capturing the wind to propel a vessel. The consistent billow of the sail as it caught the breeze and the steady movement of the boat across the water offered an efficient means of travel. The soft whisper of wind through the rigging and the gentle rocking of the boat were the primary sensations of sailing. The construction of larger sailing vessels allowed for consistent long-distance voyages across seas and oceans. These ships, often with multiple masts and complex rigging, relied on the consistent patterns of winds and currents. Navigators learned to predict these patterns, making long journeys a series of calculated passages. The consistent creak of the wooden hull, the steady slap of waves against the bow, and the consistent swaying motion of the ship became the repeated backdrop to weeks or months at sea. The consistent nature of water, offering less resistance than land, allowed for the transportation of vast quantities of goods and large numbers of people with relatively less effort once suitable vessels were developed. This inherent efficiency made water transport a cornerstone of trade and exploration throughout history, providing a steady pathway for the movement of civilizations. Our exploration of transport continues. We will delve into more aspects of its development, observing how movement across distances has consistently evolved and influenced human arrangements. With the increase in wheeled vehicles and the consistent movement of people and goods, the development of organized road networks became a necessity. Early roads were often simply worn tracks or paths, but the need for smoother, more durable surfaces for carts and wagons led to systematic construction. This was a methodical progression of laying stable pathways. The Roman Empire is known for its road system. These roads involved a painstaking, repetitive process. Layers of gravel, sand, and fitted stones were laid, often over a prepared foundation, to create a consistent and enduring surface. Imagine workers cutting stones, transporting materials, and laying pavement, all contributing to a vast network that allowed for consistent travel and communication. The straightness of many Roman roads reflects a preference for direct routes. These roads facilitated the movement of armies, goods, and information. Couriers could travel with a certain expectation of arrival time, and goods could be transported across distances with a reliability not seen before. The consistent flow of traffic on these organized pathways contributed to the stability and administration of the empire. The consistent wear on the road surface, accumulating over centuries, was a testament to its enduring use. In later periods, as trade expanded and more complex societies emerged, toll roads and turnpikes began to appear. These were roads where users paid a fee for passage. This introduced a financial aspect to travel, ensuring maintenance and a smoother journey. The repetitive action of collecting tolls at checkpoints marked a shift
towards more formalized and managed travel infrastructure. The development of maps and navigation techniques also advanced alongside roads. As routes became more defined, the need to document them accurately grew. Early maps, though rudimentary by modern standards, provided a consistent visual guide for travelers, allowing them to follow established paths and avoid unexpected detours. The study of these maps, tracing routes with a finger, was a preparation for a journey. The construction and maintenance of roads continued as an ongoing endeavor throughout history, driven by the unchanging need for efficient overland travel. Each repair, each new stretch of pavement, contributed to a continuously refined system that supported the movement of goods and people across increasingly complex landscapes. The railway represented a systematic leap in land transport, introducing the concept of controlled, linear motion on a fixed path. Its development in the 19th century was driven by the need to move heavy goods, particularly coal, more efficiently than by road or canal. The principle of the railway is simple: steel wheels running on steel rails. This combination creates low friction, allowing for heavy loads to be moved with little power. Imagine long, parallel lines of polished steel stretching across the landscape, providing a smooth, unyielding pathway. The rhythmic clickety-clack of the train wheels passing over the rail joints became a consistent sound of industrial progress. Early railways were often powered by steam locomotives. These machines converted heat energy into mechanical motion through pistons and wheels. The methodical puffing of the steam engine, the steady rotation of its driving wheels, and the whistle announcing its approach all contributed to a new, powerful, consistent rhythm of transport. The repetitive shoveling of coal into the firebox maintained the consistent energy output. The construction of railway networks involved immense methodical effort. Laying tracks required precise alignment, leveling, and securing the rails to sleepers, ties. Tunnels had to be bored through mountains, and bridges steadily constructed across rivers. Each segment of track, every bridge, every tunnel was a planned component in a vast system. The coordinated movements of construction crews working with consistent tools and techniques ensured the continuous expansion of the network. Trains followed fixed schedules, operating on established routes. This introduced a new level of consistency to travel and freight. Businesses could rely on goods arriving at specific times, and passengers could plan journeys with greater certainty. The unvarying journey along the rails removed any unexpected changes in direction.
The consistent nature of rail transport allowed for the mass movement of goods and raw materials, fueling the growth of industries and cities. It also enabled the systematic migration of people, connecting distant towns and regions with consistent travel times. The constant, repetitive motion of trains pulling their heavy loads along fixed tracks became a symbol of industrial efficiency and reliable progression. While rail offered consistent linear movement, the automobile introduced individual mobility on existing road networks.
Its development in the late 19th and early 20th centuries was a refinement of internal combustion engine technology and vehicle design. The core of the automobile is the internal combustion engine, a device that converts fuel into mechanical energy through a series of precise, repetitive cycles. Fuel and air are drawn into cylinders, compressed, ignited by a spark, and then the expanding gases push a piston. This methodical sequence of intake, compression, combustion, and exhaust is repeated hundreds or thousands of times per minute, creating the consistent power that drives the vehicle. The rhythmic hum of an engine, when operating smoothly, is a testament to this consistent internal process. Early automobiles were often simple, open vehicles, relying on basic steering mechanisms and relatively unsophisticated braking systems. The act of driving required conscious, repetitive inputs, steering, shifting gears, and applying brakes. Over time, these systems were steadily refined, becoming easier to operate. The consistent pressure on the accelerator pedal or the turn of the steering wheel became familiar actions. The widespread adoption of automobiles led to the expansion and improvement of road infrastructure. Paved roads became more common, and networks of highways and expressways were constructed to accommodate the increasing volume of traffic. Traffic laws and signals were also developed, creating a consistent framework for vehicle movement and reducing chaotic interactions. The consistent flow of vehicles on these organized roadways became a defining characteristic of modern landscapes. The manufacturing of automobiles evolved into a highly standardized and repetitive process, particularly with the advent of the assembly line in the early 20th century. This revolutionized production by breaking down complex tasks into small, repeatable steps performed by individual workers or automated machinery. The steady movement of the assembly line, with each worker performing their specific task on each vehicle, ensured consistent quality and high-volume output. The hum of the assembly line, punctuated by precise, repetitive actions, defined this new era of production. The automobile provided individual mobility, allowing people to travel at their own pace and on their own schedules, within the constraints of roads and traffic. It transformed daily life, making commutes to work, planned leisure trips, and consistent access to goods and services much more feasible. The constant presence of cars on roads, moving in consistent patterns, became a normal part of the visual and auditory environment. Our exploration of transport continues, now shifting its focus to the air. This segment will observe how humanity achieved sustained flight, always adhering to consistent principles of aerodynamics. The concept of air travel, while seemingly a significant leap, began with gentle attempts to defy gravity. Early human endeavors focused on lighter-than-air vehicles, relying on the unchanging principle of buoyancy. The hot air balloon, developed in the late 18th century, was the first successful human-carrying flight technology. Its operation is simple. Air inside a large fabric envelope is heated, making it less dense than the surrounding cooler air. This difference in density creates lift, causing the balloon to gently ascend. Imagine a large, colorful balloon steadily drifting upwards, carried by the invisible currents of the air. The sounds would be the gentle hiss of the burner and the quiet whisper of the wind, contributing to a sense of tranquility. The ascent is gradual, the descent is slow, and the movement is dictated by the flow of air. Following balloons, dirigibles or airships offered a more controlled, though still unhurried form of lighter-than-air travel. These were elongated balloons filled with lifting gases like hydrogen or helium, equipped with engines and rudders for propulsion and steering. They moved with a stately pace, far from the hurried rush of modern aircraft. The consistent hum of their engines and the vast silent envelopes passing overhead contributed to a sense of measured majesty. Their consistent ability to stay aloft for extended periods allowed for long-distance journeys across continents at a leisurely speed. The true progression in air travel came with heavier-than-air flight, a development rooted in persistent, methodical experimentation. The understanding of aerodynamics, the way air interacts with moving objects, was central to this progress. Early pioneers meticulously studied the flight of birds, observing the principles of lift, drag, thrust, and weight. Their initial designs were often based on gliders, unpowered aircraft that relied on air currents and gravity for sustained flight. The quiet glide of a glider, descending through the air, was a methodical way to understand aerodynamic forces. There was no noise of engines, just the gentle rush of air. The Wright brothers, through a series of methodical experiments with kites and gliders, refined their understanding of aerodynamic control. Their success in 1903 with the Wright Flyer was the culmination of numerous small, consistent adjustments to wing shape, control surfaces, and propulsion. The first powered flights were brief and hesitant, a controlled sequence of movements through the air. The sputtering of their small engine and the gentle whir of their propellers contributed to the consistent hum of early aviation. The subsequent development of aircraft was a progression of design refinements. Biplanes, with their two sets of wings, offered initial stability and lift. Later, monoplanes, with a single set of wings, provided greater efficiency and speed. Each design modification was a calculated step, aimed at improving consistent performance. The shapes of wings, the placement of control surfaces, and the power of engines were all incrementally refined, always adhering to the unchanging laws of physics.
The materials used also evolved consistently. Early aircraft relied on wood and fabric, which were gradually replaced by stronger, lighter metals like aluminum alloys. These material changes allowed for the construction of larger, faster, and more reliable aircraft, but the underlying principles of flight remained constant. The precise assembly of these materials into an aerodynamic form was a meticulous, repetitive process, ensuring structural integrity. The mid-20th century saw the dawn of the jet age, a consistent acceleration in air travel brought about by the development of the jet engine. While seemingly a significant change in propulsion, the jet engine operates on consistent principles of thrust and reaction. A jet engine works by drawing air into its front, compressing it, mixing it with fuel, igniting the mixture, and then expelling the hot, expanding gases out the rear. This continuous, methodical process generates a powerful forward thrust. The consistent roar of a jet engine, once a novel sound, became a characteristic of modern air travel, signifying controlled power. The repetitive cycles within the engine, always following the same sequence, ensure its unwavering operation. The introduction of jet aircraft led to consistently faster and higher flights. Commercial airliners could now traverse continents in a matter of hours, quicker than propeller-driven planes, yet their flight paths and speeds remained highly consistent. The vast majority of a jet flight involves steady cruising at a constant altitude and speed, a smooth, unchanging progression through the air. The quiet hum of the cabin, with occasional subtle shifts, contributed to the measured quality of long-distance journeys. The design of jet airliners followed consistent aerodynamic principles adapted for higher speeds and altitudes. Their streamlined bodies, swept wings, and powerful engines were all optimized for efficient, consistent performance. The manufacturing process for these complex aircraft is a highly controlled, repetitive assembly of millions of components, each precisely placed and joined to ensure the aircraft's consistent reliability. The steady movement of airliners on runways, their methodical ascent into the sky, and their consistent descent back to Earth all reflect a deeply ordered system. The establishment of air traffic control systems became crucial for managing the consistent flow of increasing numbers of aircraft. These systems rely on precise communication, radar tracking, and established flight paths to ensure safe and orderly movement in the skies. Every aircraft follows a predetermined route, and every pilot adheres to consistent instructions, contributing to a highly structured environment. The repetitive nature of takeoff and landing procedures, all following strict protocols, ensures safety through unwavering consistency. The jet age transformed global travel by making long distances accessible within consistent time frames. It connected continents and cultures with a consistency previously unimaginable, all driven by the unchanging laws of physics and the steady refinement of engineering.
Modern transport is defined by its intermodal coordination, a systematic arrangement of different modes working together to move goods and people. This integrated approach aims for continuous flow, minimizing disruptions. Consider the journey of a single shipping container. This standardized steel box is designed to be transferred between different transport modes without unloading its contents. Imagine a container filled with goods being loaded onto a large cargo ship at a port. The
The precise crane operations lifting and placing the container onto the vessel are methodical movements. The ship then embarks on a long voyage across the ocean, a consistent progression across vast waters. Upon arrival at its destination port, the container is unloaded by another set of cranes and placed onto a freight train. The consistent rumble of the train as it carries the container inland, following fixed railway schedules and routes, is a steady rhythm of long-distance land transport. There's no rush in this leg of the journey, just a consistent, linear movement towards its next transfer point. Finally, at an inland rail terminal, the container is lifted once more and placed onto a truck chassis. The truck then undertakes the final leg of the journey, delivering the container directly to a warehouse or distribution center. This transfer between ship, train, and truck, each step following a consistent protocol, demonstrates the efficiency of modern intermodal transport. The consistent movement of these containers, untouched by human hands during transfers, contributes to a sense of global order. This intermodal approach emphasizes standardization, the consistent dimensions of the shipping container itself, which allows for its handling by different types of equipment and vehicles worldwide. This universal compatibility ensures that goods can be moved across continents with a consistent level of efficiency and reliability. The adherence to these standards is fundamental to global commerce. The consistent scheduling and coordination between different transport operators, shipping lines, railway companies, trucking firms, are also vital. This methodical planning ensures that transfers happen smoothly, minimizing delays and maintaining a consistent flow of goods. The entire system operates on a foundation of agreed-upon procedures and expected outcomes. Public transport systems represent a distinct facet of movement, focusing on the consistent, scheduled movement of large numbers of people within urban and regional areas. These systems operate on fixed routes and timetables, providing a rhythmic consistency to daily commutes and journeys. Buses follow predetermined routes, stopping at fixed locations at scheduled times. The steady hum of the bus engine, the gentle sway as it navigates streets, and the consistent stops and starts contribute to a familiar rhythm for passengers. The consistent arrival and departure times at bus stops provide a reliable framework for daily travel. The sight of a bus steadily moving along its route is a common and consistently present urban scene. Trains and subways operate on fixed rail lines, offering an even higher degree of consistency in terms of speed and travel time. The rhythmic clickety-clack of the train on the tracks, the consistent acceleration and deceleration between stations, and the consistent announcements of upcoming stops create a highly ordered and repetitive travel experience. The doors open and close with consistent regularity, and the train departs precisely on schedule, contributing to an unwavering sense of routine. The entire concept of public transport relies on consistent scheduling. Timetables are designed to ensure that services run at consistent intervals, allowing passengers to plan their journeys with certainty. Any deviations from these schedules are typically communicated consistently, ensuring that travelers are informed. This unwavering adherence to a planned routine provides a sense of order and reliability to millions of daily journeys. The infrastructure for public transport, including bus stops, train stations, and subway platforms, is designed for consistent access and transitions. Passengers move through these spaces following established pathways, contributing to a consistent flow of people. The systematic boarding and alighting processes are repetitive and efficient, ensuring the continuous movement of the system. Looking toward the future, the evolution of transport continues, not with sudden, unpredicted shifts, but with a steady, calculated refinement of existing principles, driven by the needs for efficiency and consistent, reliable movement. Electric vehicles, for instance, represent a consistent step in automotive evolution. While the power source changes from fossil fuels to electricity, the fundamental principles of wheeled transport remain. The quiet hum of an electric motor, the smooth acceleration, and the absence of exhaust fumes contribute to a consistent driving experience. The consistent charging cycles and the gradual expansion of charging infrastructure are part of their steady integration into daily life.
The concept of autonomous vehicles or self-driving cars also points towards a more consistent future for road transport. These vehicles rely on vast amounts of data and complex algorithms to navigate roads, interpret traffic signals, and avoid obstacles with unwavering consistency. The goal is to eliminate human error and create a driving experience that is entirely consistent and safe. Imagine a car moving smoothly and consistently through traffic, its movements entirely dictated by logical, pre-programmed rules. There will be no sudden acceleration, no unexpected swerves, just a steady, calculated progression. In public transport, the development of high-speed rail continues to extend the consistent reach of trains. While faster, these systems still operate on fixed tracks and strict schedules, ensuring a highly consistent and reliable journey. The smooth sensation of gliding at high speeds without the turbulence of air travel offers a unique form of consistent movement over long distances. The consistent hum inside the cabin provides a consistent ambiance. Even more advanced concepts like hyperloop systems, which propose transporting passengers and cargo in pods through low-pressure tubes, are fundamentally based on consistent physics. The vacuum environment minimizes air resistance, allowing for high speeds with minimal energy. The movement within such a system would be a smooth, linear acceleration and deceleration entirely dictated by precise control systems, ensuring a consistent journey without external disturbances. The consistent silence inside the pod would be a notable characteristic. The future of transport is about a continued pursuit of greater efficiency and, above all, consistent reliability. It aims to create systems that move us and our goods with unwavering consistency, providing a continuous sense of order
in our increasingly connected world. The steady progress of innovation ensures that movement continues to be a dependable foundational element of human existence. The evolution of transport has consistently influenced education by altering how knowledge is disseminated and how learning environments are accessed. Early forms of movement, while slow, allowed for the gradual spread of oral traditions and basic skills. As humans moved for sustenance, they subtly carried and shared their understanding of tools, plants, and animal behavior across different groups. This movement ensured that practical knowledge was not confined to a single location, but diffused at a steady pace. With the advent of more organized transport, like carts and wagons, the movement of scholars, teachers, and educational materials became more consistent. Imagine a teacher traveling between villages carrying scrolls or rudimentary texts. The predictable nature of wheeled transport allowed for planned itineraries, making it possible to establish more regular teaching circuits that could serve a wider geographic area than previously possible.
The development of roads and waterways further amplified this influence. Roman roads, for instance, facilitated the consistent travel of administrators and military personnel, who often brought with them knowledge of law, engineering, and governance to distant provinces. This predictable flow of educated individuals helped standardize practices and share advancements across vast territories. Similarly, navigable rivers and seas allowed for the consistent exchange of ideas between different cultures, enriching local educational practices with foreign concepts. The very routes of trade became pathways for knowledge. The railway system had a profound, consistent impact on education in the 19th and 20th centuries. It made it possible for students from rural areas to commute to schools and universities in larger towns and cities on a regular, consistent schedule. This expanded access to higher education for a broader segment of the population. Furthermore, the reliable transport of books, newspapers, and other educational resources via rail meant that information could be distributed widely and consistently, fostering literacy and the spread of new ideas across a nation. The predictable arrival of mail trains carrying publications became a common rhythm of information dissemination. In the modern era, air travel and digital networks, though the latter is not transport, it's enabled by the physical transport of infrastructure, have compressed the time and distance for educational exchange. Scholars can consistently attend international conferences, and educational materials can be transported globally with efficiency. While the physical movement is faster, the underlying principle of consistent access to knowledge remains. The ability to bring experts from distant locations to teach or collaborate occurs with a consistency unimaginable in earlier times. Transport's evolution has been consistently intertwined with technological advancement, each pushing the other forward in a methodical progression. The very act of moving goods and people across distances often necessitated new tools and methods, which in turn spurred further innovation. The invention of the wheel, for example, was not just a transport innovation, it was a fundamental technological leap.
Its consistent rotation led to the development of other rotational mechanisms, influencing technologies far beyond transport, such as pottery wheels or grinding mills. The systematic understanding of its mechanics created a foundation for future machine design. The consistent need for more efficient methods of moving heavy materials led to the development of lever systems and pulleys. In ancient times, these mechanical advantages, while simple, allowed for predictable manipulation of loads that would otherwise be immovable by human strength alone. The repetitive application of these tools for construction or loading contributed to a growing body of practical engineering knowledge.
The Industrial Revolution saw a significant feedback loop between transport and technology. The development of the steam engine, initially for pumping water in mines, found a consistent application in locomotion for steamships and locomotives. This, in turn, drove advancements in metallurgy for stronger boilers and rails, and precision manufacturing for consistent engine parts. The demands of building vast railway networks spurred innovations in civil engineering, bridge building techniques, and tunneling technologies, all requiring consistent application of new methods. The evolution of the automobile further drove advancements in engine design, material science for lighter, stronger chassis, and manufacturing processes like the assembly line. The consistent mass production of vehicles required precision engineering and interchangeable parts, influencing factory organization and quality control far beyond the automotive sector. In aviation, the pursuit of sustained flight led to breakthroughs in aerodynamics, lightweight materials, and propulsion systems. The need for consistent navigation and communication for aircraft spurred advancements in radio, radar, and later satellite technology. These innovations, initially driven by transport, often found consistent applications in other fields, demonstrating the predictable cross-pollination of technological progress. The consistent evolution of transport has had a profound and unwavering economic impact, fundamentally reshaping how goods are produced, distributed, and consumed, and creating new economic systems. Early forms of transport, though limited, enabled the very first instances of specialization and localized trade. Groups could consistently exchange resources they had in abundance for those they lacked, even if the distances were short. This predictable exchange of goods created the beginnings of rudimentary economies. The development of animal-powered transport and wheeled vehicles allowed for the consistent movement of larger volumes of goods over greater distances. This facilitated the expansion of trade routes, enabling the consistent exchange of goods between different regions and eventually continents. The consistent flow of goods and raw materials via rail became a cornerstone of industrial economies.
The automobile further decentralized economic activity, allowing for consistent commuting to work and access to a wider range of services and retail outlets. The trucking industry, a direct consequence of improved road networks, created a flexible and consistent system for point-to-point delivery of goods, complementing rail transport. This consistent delivery allowed for just-in-time manufacturing, reducing inventory costs and increasing efficiency across supply chains. Air cargo revolutionized the consistent movement of high-value, time-sensitive goods across global distances. While more expensive, its speed offered predictable delivery times for perishable goods, electronics, and urgent supplies. This enabled the development of globalized production networks, where components could be consistently sourced and assembled from different parts of the world. The intermodal container system, as previously discussed, further solidified global economic integration by ensuring a consistent and efficient flow of goods across various transport modes. This predictable system of logistics underpins much of modern international trade, allowing for consistent delivery schedules and reduced handling costs. The consistent movement of goods, driven by predictable market demands, defines the global economy. The evolution of transport has consistently played a significant role in shaping political systems, from the consolidation of early states to the complex arrangements of modern global governance. The ability to consistently move people and resources has often underpinned political power. In early empires, the development of roads and organized pathways was crucial for political control. Empires like the Roman Empire invested heavily in building extensive road networks. These roads allowed for the consistent movement of legions, enabling rapid deployment of military force to maintain order and suppress rebellions. They also facilitated the consistent travel of administrators, tax collectors, and messengers, ensuring that central authority could be predictably extended and maintained across vast territories. The uniform construction of these roads reinforced the idea of a unified and consistently managed domain. The development of navigable waterways and shipbuilding similarly influenced political power, particularly for maritime empires. Nations with strong naval capabilities could consistently project their power across oceans, controlling trade routes and establishing colonies in distant lands. The reliable transport of goods and troops by sea was fundamental to their economic and military dominance. The consistent rhythm of ship movements, connecting distant parts of an empire, was a key element of their political structure. The railway system had a transformative and consistent impact on national politics in the 19th and 20th centuries. Railways enabled the consistent movement of troops and supplies within a nation, strengthening central governments and aiding in national unification, as seen in the United States and Canada. They facilitated the consistent flow of information and goods, linking disparate regions more closely and fostering a sense of national identity. The standardized schedules and routes of trains reinforced the idea of a cohesive and consistently governed nation. The rise of the automobile further decentralized political power in some ways, allowing for greater individual mobility and influencing urban planning and suburban development. The consistent ability of citizens to travel more freely affected political participation, enabling easier access to polling stations or political gatherings. Road networks became vital infrastructure for government services and emergency response, requiring consistent investment and management. In the modern era, air travel and intermodal transport have consistently facilitated global diplomacy and international relations. Leaders and diplomats can consistently travel between countries for meetings and negotiations, allowing for more frequent and direct political engagement. The consistent flow of goods across borders, enabled by efficient global logistics, has fostered economic interdependence, influencing international trade policies and treaties. The very consistent operation of global supply chains contributes to a political environment where nations are more interconnected. Transport's influence on political systems is a consistent narrative of control, integration, and communication. The ability to consistently move forces, resources, and information has always been a fundamental element in the predictable establishment and maintenance of political power, shaping the boundaries and interactions of states over time. The evolution of transport has consistently and subtly shaped culture, influencing how people live, interact, perceive their world, and develop shared experiences. Movement is not merely physical. It carries ideas, customs, and forms of expression. Early forms of human movement, such as nomadic migration, directly shaped nomadic cultures. Their consistent movement in search of resources led to cultural practices centered around portability, adaptability, and a deep understanding of natural cycles. Their oral traditions and practical skills were consistently passed down through generations within mobile communities. The development of animal-powered transport and early roads facilitated the consistent exchange of goods, but also ideas, technologies, and artistic styles between different communities. Imagine a merchant traveling along a trade route, consistently encountering new customs, languages, and artistic expressions which would then slowly diffuse back into their own culture. The consistency of these exchanges fostered cultural blending and diversification.
Maritime transport, particularly long-distance sailing voyages,
had a profound and consistent impact on coastal and island cultures. These cultures developed unique traditions related to seafaring, navigation, and interaction with foreign lands. The consistent arrival of ships brought new goods, people, and ideas, leading to cultural adaptations and the development of maritime-specific forms of art, music, and language. The very predictable nature of the tides and winds became woven into their daily lives. The railway consistently fostered a sense of national culture. It connected previously isolated towns and regions, allowing for the consistent sharing of news, fashion, and entertainment. People from different areas could travel more consistently to urban centers, leading to a homogenization of certain cultural norms and the development of distinct urban cultures. The consistent schedules of trains instilled a new sense of punctuality and time management in daily life. The automobile brought a new dimension of cultural influence, especially in countries like the United States. It fostered a culture of individual freedom and mobility, influencing leisure activities like road trips, music as cars as symbols of freedom, and the development of suburban lifestyles. The consistent presence of cars reshaped landscapes with gas stations, motels, and drive-in establishments, creating new cultural landmarks. The act of driving itself became a consistent part of personal identity for many. Air travel has consistently facilitated a globalized culture, allowing for rapid and frequent international exchange. People can consistently travel to experience different cultures firsthand, leading to a broader understanding and appreciation of global diversity. The consistent presence of international flights has made world events and cultural trends more accessible, contributing to a more interconnected global consciousness. The predictable journey through different time zones has become a common modern experience. Transport's shaping of culture is a consistent narrative of interaction, dissemination, and adaptation. The predictable movement of people and ideas across geographies has always been a fundamental element in the subtle evolution of human societies and their shared ways of life. The evolution of transport has consistently influenced social structures, altering how communities form, how people interact, and the stratification within societies. Early forms of human movement, for instance, often led to the development of nomadic or semi-nomadic social groups. These groups were organized to facilitate frequent movement, with roles often distributed to ensure efficient packing, travel, and resource gathering. The regular relocation created fluid social bonds, emphasizing adaptability.
With the advent of more settled agriculture, road networks and waterways began to define new social patterns. Communities located along established trade routes or navigable rivers often grew into bustling centers, attracting diverse populations. This consistent influx of travelers and merchants led to more complex social hierarchies, with specialized roles for traders, artisans, and administrators. The consistent accessibility of these locations fostered a more interconnected social fabric compared to isolated inland communities. The railway system in the 19th and 20th centuries had a significant impact on urban development and social mobility. Cities grew consistently around railway hubs, drawing populations from rural areas. This led to larger, more concentrated urban centers with new social dynamics. The consistent availability of rail travel allowed for greater geographic mobility, enabling individuals to move for work or new opportunities with a regularity previously unavailable. This consistent movement contributed to changes in family structures and community ties, as people could maintain connections over greater distances. The automobile further diversified social structures, particularly in countries like the United States. It facilitated the growth of suburbs, allowing people to live further from city centers while maintaining consistent access through daily commutes. This decentralized living led to new community formations, distinct from dense urban environments. The consistent use of personal vehicles also influenced social interactions, making spontaneous visits more common and altering traditional patterns of neighborhood gatherings. Drive-in movies and fast food restaurants emerged as consistent social venues tied to automobile culture. Air travel has, in turn, fostered globalized social networks. Individuals can consistently travel across continents for business or leisure, leading to more frequent international interactions and the formation of diverse social circles that transcend national borders. The consistent exposure to different cultures through travel influences personal perspectives and creates a more interconnected global society. This consistent ease of international movement subtly shapes individual identities and collective understanding. The evolution of transport has consistently, though subtly, influenced language and communication, shaping vocabulary, idioms, and the very speed at which information travels between people. In early periods, the slow pace of human and animal-powered transport meant that language evolution was often regional. Dialects and accents developed consistently within isolated communities, with changes spreading gradually as people moved between areas. New words or phrases associated with specific travel methods, for example, terms for types of boats, parts of a wagon, became integrated into local vernaculars.
The consistent use of trade routes facilitated the spread of common languages or pidgins, allowing merchants from different linguistic backgrounds to communicate effectively. This predictable need for intergroup communication
led to the development of simplified forms of language, or the adoption of common trading lexicons. The consistent exchange of goods also led to the predictable adoption of foreign words for new products or concepts. The railway system had a profound, consistent impact on linguistic standardization within nations. As people consistently traveled by train across regions, exposure to different dialects increased. This contributed to a gradual reduction in extreme regional variations and the consistent spread of a more standardized national language, often tied to urban centers accessible by rail. Railway station announcements and standardized timetables also introduced new forms of clear, concise, and consistent communication. The automobile influenced communication in ways related to personal mobility. The development of road signs with standardized symbols and short, direct instructions became a universal language for drivers. The consistent need for clear communication on roads led to an evolution of signaling, hand signals, turn signals that became widely understood. The consistent use of car radios also contributed to the widespread and simultaneous dissemination of news and entertainment, influencing common cultural references in communication. Air travel has consistently accelerated the global exchange of languages and communication practices. The rapid movement of people means that business and social interactions across linguistic barriers are more frequent. This has consistently driven the need for more efficient translation tools and fostered the widespread use of common international languages like English. The consistent availability of global news broadcasts transmitted via communication networks, often reliant on transport infrastructure, further shapes global dialogue. The consistent impact of transport on language and communication is a narrative of words and information moving, adapting, and integrating across time and space, driven by the unchanging need for human connection. Beyond its functional aspects, transport has consistently influenced aesthetics, shaping design, art, and the very visual experience of motion across different eras. Early forms of transport, like dugout canoes or simple carts, possessed a utilitarian beauty. Their shapes were dictated by function and available materials, resulting in forms that were simple, consistent, and reflective of natural contours. The repetitive patterns of woven baskets for carrying, or the smooth, unadorned surface of a log raft, presented an aesthetic of fundamental utility. The sailing ship, in particular, became a consistent object of aesthetic appreciation. Its towering masts, billowing sails, and graceful hull lines, all designed for efficient interaction with wind and water, created forms that were both functional and visually striking. The symmetrical arrangement of sails and rigging, responding consistently to the unseen forces of the wind, offered a dynamic yet harmonious visual spectacle. Maritime art consistently depicted these vessels, celebrating their beauty.
The steam locomotive embodied a new, powerful aesthetic of the industrial age. Its massive, consistent metal components, rhythmic piston action, and plumes of steam created a visual and auditory spectacle of immense controlled power. The polished brass and painted steel of early locomotives presented an aesthetic of robust engineering and unwavering mechanical efficiency. Railway architecture, with its grand stations and intricate bridges, consistently reflected this new industrial aesthetic. The automobile, particularly in its early designs, possessed a distinct aesthetic that evolved consistently with technological progress and cultural tastes. From the utilitarian simplicity of early models to the more streamlined forms of later decades, car design became an art form, reflecting consistent trends in industrial design. The smooth curves and polished surfaces of classic cars represent an aesthetic of individual mobility and personal freedom, consistently captured in art and advertising. Aircraft, from the early biplanes to modern jetliners, embody an aesthetic of aerodynamics and efficiency. Their streamlined shapes, designed to minimize drag and maximize lift, consistently present a visual of effortless movement through the air. The clean lines and consistent metallic sheen of a modern airliner reflect a beauty of functional design and advanced engineering. The abstract patterns of contrails in the sky, left by consistently flying jets, are a new, predictable visual element in the atmospheric landscape. The aesthetics of transport are a consistent reflection of technological capability and cultural values. From the simple forms of primitive conveyances to the complex designs of modern vehicles, the visual experience of movement has consistently evolved, shaped by the unchanging principles of function and efficiency. Our exploration of transport now expands to consider diverse perspectives on movement, particularly from indigenous peoples across the globe. Their understanding of displacement, while differing from industrial views, offers insights into human interaction with natural environments and the enduring principles of efficient travel. For many indigenous cultures, early forms of movement were often understood not merely as a means to cover distance, but rather as a practice deeply embedded in their relationship with the land, resources, and spiritual world. These pathways were not always formalized roads, but rather a network of trails, rivers, and seasonal routes traversed with a consistent awareness of the environment.
The concept of songlines, or dreaming tracks, among various Aboriginal Australian groups exemplifies this. These are intricate systems of ancient pathways that crisscross the continent, traditionally followed by ancestral beings during the dreaming. These paths are associated with specific songs, stories, and ceremonies that describe the landscape, its features, and the resources available. When indigenous people moved along these songlines, they were not just physically displacing themselves, they were actively reciting and engaging with the narrative of their ancestral past. This consistent interaction with the land through song and story ensures a continuous connection to their heritage. The act of traversing a songline is a repetitive, purposeful journey that reinforces cultural knowledge and spiritual continuity.
In the dense Amazon rainforest, indigenous peoples developed and consistently utilized riverine transport as their primary mode of movement. Canoes, often meticulously carved from single tree trunks, similar to early dugouts but with refined local designs, allowed for consistent travel along the vast network of rivers and tributaries. The rhythmic paddling, often a communal activity, created a predictable propulsion through the water. This method allowed for consistent access to diverse ecosystems, supporting hunting, fishing, gathering, and the exchange of goods between different communities along the riverbanks. The knowledge of river currents, seasonal floods, and safe passages was consistently passed down through generations, ensuring reliable navigation. For Arctic indigenous groups, like the Inuit, movement across vast, frozen landscapes necessitated distinct approaches. The kayak, a highly specialized skin-on-frame boat, enabled consistent hunting and travel in icy waters. Its design, optimized for stability and stealth, allowed for predictable maneuverability in challenging marine environments. On land, or rather over ice and snow, the sled pulled by dogs became a foundational transport method. The consistent sound of dog teams moving across snow, the rhythmic panting of the dogs, and the steady glide of the sled runners contributed to a predictable, efficient mode of travel over immense open territories. The knowledge of snow conditions and ice safety was vital and consistently applied. In the plains of North America, before the widespread introduction of the horse by Europeans, many indigenous groups relied on walking and the use of the travois. A travois was a simple A-frame drag device, typically made of two long poles lashed to a dog, or later a horse, with a platform or netting for carrying loads. It was a simple, low-tech solution for transporting camp goods across prairies. The repetitive drag marks left by the travois on the ground were a subtle sign of consistent movement. This method allowed communities to move their entire camps, often following the consistent migration patterns of bison, their primary food source. These early indigenous forms of transport highlight a common thread. Movement was seldom about conquering distance for its own sake. Instead, it was often a purposeful, interconnected activity tied to resource management, cultural continuity, and deep environmental knowledge. The methods were developed through consistent observation and adaptation, ensuring reliable, predictable travel within their respective ecosystems. The arrival of new transport technologies, particularly with European contact, introduced significant shifts in indigenous ways of life, leading to consistent adaptations rather than outright abandonment of traditional knowledge. The horse in North America provides a powerful example.
Initially, horses were an unknown element. However, once acquired by indigenous groups, their integration into existing ways of life occurred methodically. For Plains peoples, like the Lakota or Comanche, the horse transformed hunting, warfare, and mobility. The ability to consistently cover vast distances with greater speed and carrying capacity fundamentally altered their nomadic patterns. Horse-drawn travois became larger, allowing for more possessions to be moved. The consistent training of horses, a repetitive and patient process, ensured their reliable performance in various tasks. This adaptation to horse culture became a consistent and defining feature for many Plains nations. Similarly, the introduction of European sailing vessels by explorers and traders, while initially imposing, also led to consistent adaptations by coastal indigenous groups. Some groups learned to navigate and even build variations of these vessels, incorporating new materials or techniques into their existing maritime knowledge. The exchange of goods often relied on predictable patterns of rendezvous at coastal points, influencing new trade routes and social interactions. The consistent arrival of ships, though sometimes disruptive, also became a predictable part of their coastal existence. With the later expansion of railways and roads into indigenous territories, the impact was often more complex. While these new infrastructures could bring certain goods or access, their construction frequently disrupted traditional land use patterns and sacred sites. Indigenous communities often experienced the imposition of these transport systems rather than their gradual adoption. However, even within these imposed systems, various groups developed consistent strategies for interaction, whether for trade, travel to new resource areas, or navigating the new socio-political landscape. The predictable scheduling of trains and buses offered a new, albeit sometimes limited, form of consistent mobility. The 20th and 21st centuries have seen indigenous communities engaging with modern mechanized transport, like trucks, cars, and even small aircraft, much like other populations. However, their use is often integrated into existing cultural practices and environmental considerations. For example, remote indigenous communities in Canada or Alaska utilize bush planes for consistent access to remote hunting grounds or to transport essential supplies, adapting modern technology to traditional livelihoods. The consistent buzzing of these small aircraft in otherwise silent landscapes indicates the enduring need for efficient movement. This consistent engagement with new transport technologies is characterized by a pattern of adaptation and integration, rather than complete replacement. Indigenous peoples have consistently assessed new tools and methods, incorporating those that enhance their existing ways of life or address specific needs, while retaining their deep ecological knowledge and cultural values related to movement. The enduring principles of sustainable travel and deep connection to the land remain consistent, even when new vehicles are involved. The evolution of transport has consistently influenced indigenous education and knowledge systems, subtly shaping how information is acquired, preserved, and transmitted across generations.
In pre-colonial times, movement itself was a fundamental component of indigenous education. Walking the land, following established trails, or navigating rivers were not just physical acts, but pedagogical journeys. Elders consistently transmitted knowledge about resource locations, seasonal cycles, sacred sites, and ancestral stories while moving through the landscape. The act of movement provided a consistent context for learning, making knowledge tangible and experiential. The rhythm of travel became a consistent rhythm of instruction. The concept of place-based learning was inherent in many indigenous educational approaches. Children consistently learned about their environment by directly interacting with it during travels, identifying plants, tracking animals, understanding weather patterns. Transport methods were part of this curriculum. Learning to paddle a canoe, track game on a travois, or navigate by stars were essential skills, consistently taught and honed through repetitive practice. This direct, consistent engagement ensured practical competence. The arrival of new transport methods often brought with it new forms of knowledge and, sometimes, new educational challenges. The introduction of the horse necessitated learning about horse care, riding techniques, and new strategies for hunting and warfare. This knowledge was consistently acquired through observation and direct instruction from those who had mastered the new technology. The consistent use of horses in daily life integrated this new knowledge seamlessly into existing educational frameworks. However, the imposition of external transport infrastructures, such as railways and roads, often disrupted traditional land-based educational practices. These new lines of movement fragmented territories
and sometimes led to the displacement of communities, making it harder to consistently follow traditional routes where specific knowledge was imparted. The shift towards settled communities, sometimes near railway lines, also changed the consistent daily rhythms of learning tied to nomadic movement. In contemporary times, indigenous communities often navigate a dual educational landscape. While traditional land-based learning methods persist, modern transport, like school buses, cars, and air travel, provides consistent access to formal schooling systems located in larger towns or cities. This allows younger generations to acquire new skills and knowledge, while ideally maintaining connections to their cultural heritage. The consistent bus ride to school, for instance, becomes a new, predictable part of the learning journey. The consistent use of modern transport for cultural exchange and revitalization efforts is also notable. Indigenous elders and knowledge keepers can consistently travel to conferences, workshops, and community gatherings, sharing traditional stories, languages, and practices with younger generations or with other indigenous groups. This consistent movement helps ensure the continuity and adaptation of indigenous knowledge systems in a changing world.
The evolution of transport has consistently shaped indigenous economic networks, dictating how resources were acquired, exchanged, and how trade relationships were established and maintained. For many indigenous groups, movement was inherently tied to economic activity, operating within established systems of exchange. In regions with diverse ecosystems, such as the varied landscapes of pre-colonial North America, indigenous groups utilized their knowledge of terrain and waterways to establish consistent trade routes. For example, certain groups in the Pacific Northwest consistently traveled by large cedar canoes to exchange fish and marine products for furs and other goods from inland communities. This regular movement facilitated a predictable flow of resources, leading to specialized production in different areas. The rhythmic paddling of these canoes across calm waters was a consistent part of their economic endeavors. The vast network of trails across continents served as more than just pathways. They were economic arteries. Groups would consistently meet at specific locations during certain seasons for intertribal trade fairs. Here, goods like obsidian, copper, shells, and even specific types of feathers were exchanged. The consistent journey to these meeting points, often taking days or weeks, was a planned economic activity, leading to predictable exchanges and the establishment of long-term trade partnerships. The items carried on these journeys, whether by human effort or simple travois, represented consistent economic value. The introduction of new transport methods, such as the horse on the North American plains, significantly altered existing economic structures. The horse allowed for the consistent hunting of larger numbers of bison, leading to a surplus of hides and meat. This increased production, combined with the horse's ability to consistently transport larger loads, facilitated more extensive trade networks with other indigenous groups, and eventually with European traders. The repetitive action of preparing and moving large quantities of dried meat and processed hides became a consistent economic rhythm. Similarly, in regions where canoes were essential, like the Great Lakes or the Amazon, Their consistent use for transport underpinned extensive trading economies. Furs, wild rice, medicinal plants, and crafted goods were moved along vast river systems. The predictable navigation of these waterways, understanding currents and portages, ensured a consistent flow of commerce. The repetitive movements of paddling or portaging defined their economic rhythms. The concept of seasonal migrations also had a direct economic component. Many indigenous groups consistently moved their entire communities throughout the year to follow migrating game animals or to access seasonal plant resources. This methodical displacement was an economic necessity, ensuring consistent access to sustenance. The act of dismantling and reassembling camps, moving belongings, and traversing known routes was a predictable, repetitive economic cycle.
The evolution of transport has also consistently influenced indigenous political arrangements, affecting how power was consolidated, how alliances were formed, and how authority was maintained within and between groups. The consistent ability to move resources and communicate over distances was often a factor in political stability. For groups with vast territories, like many nomadic bands, political organization was often decentralized. However, leadership often involved individuals who had extensive knowledge of travel routes and resource locations. Their ability to consistently guide the group to sustenance and safe havens provided a basis for authority. The act of leading a migration, ensuring the consistent movement of the community, was a key leadership role. The establishment of consistent trade routes also led to political alliances and sometimes conflicts. Groups that controlled crucial sections of trade routes or had consistent access to valuable resources often gained political influence over their neighbors. Treaties and agreements negotiated through consistent communication facilitated by transport defined spheres of influence and ensured the predictable flow of commerce, which in turn contributed to political stability. The consistent movement of goods implicitly reinforced established political relationships. The introduction of new transport technologies, such as the horse, had significant political implications for some indigenous nations. Groups that effectively adopted and controlled horses gained a consistent advantage in hunting, warfare, and mobility. This enhanced mobility translated into increased political power, allowing them to expand their territories or exert influence over other groups. The consistent tactical advantage provided by horses reshaped intertribal political dynamics. Similarly, the strategic location of indigenous communities along major waterways often gave them political leverage. Control over portage routes or key river junctions allowed them to consistently regulate trade and collect tolls, asserting their authority over transit. The consistent passage of canoes and other watercraft through their territories reinforced their political claims to the waterways. The consistent need for defense or resource sharing
often led to the formation of confederacies or alliances, which relied on the ability to move and communicate between member groups. Messages and envoys would consistently travel along established pathways, ensuring that political decisions could be communicated and coordinated across distances. The consistent maintenance of these communication lines was vital for collective security and political cohesion.
In encounters with colonial powers, the control and disruption of indigenous transport networks became a consistent tool of political subjugation. The building of roads and railways by external forces, often without consent, aimed to impose new lines of authority and facilitate external control over resources. However, indigenous peoples also consistently adapted, using these new transport systems to organize resistance, communicate between dispersed groups, and travel to negotiate or advocate for their rights. The consistent political response to these changes often involved navigating and reinterpreting the new mobility landscape. The evolution of transport has consistently and deeply influenced indigenous culture, shaping their stories, ceremonies, art forms, and daily rhythms of life. Movement itself was often a cultural act, imbued with meaning beyond mere physical displacement. Oral traditions and storytelling were often intrinsically linked to travel. Long journeys on foot, by canoe, or with pack animals provided consistent opportunities for elders to share narratives, myths, and historical accounts. The landmarks encountered along a route, consistently revisited, became mnemonic devices for remembering complex stories. The rhythm of a paddle stroke or a walking pace could influence the cadence of a traditional song, linking movement directly to cultural expression. Ceremonies and rituals often involved consistent patterns of movement, such as ceremonial dances that mimic animal movements or seasonal migrations. Pilgrimages to sacred sites, undertaken with a consistent sense of purpose and reverence, were fundamental to many spiritual practices. The consistent journey to these sites, often following ancient pathways, reinforced spiritual connections to the land and ancestors. The act of movement became a form of prayer or meditation. Art forms consistently reflected the influence of transport. The intricate designs on canoes, sleds, or horse trappings often depicted elements of the natural world or ancestral beings associated with travel. The patterns might represent migration routes, animal tracks, or flowing water. The craftsmanship involved in creating these transport tools was itself a cultural expression, with specific techniques and aesthetic standards passed down consistently through generations. The consistent visual representation of movement permeated their artistic endeavors. The seasonal rhythms of life for many indigenous groups were consistently dictated by patterns of movement tied to resource availability.
The consistent migration to summer fishing camps, winter hunting grounds, or traditional gathering sites shaped their entire cultural calendar. Their social gatherings, ceremonies, and even dietary practices were consistently adapted to these cycles of movement. The very structure of their year revolved around predictable displacement.
The arrival of new transport technologies, while sometimes disruptive, also led to new cultural expressions. The horse, for example, became a powerful cultural symbol for many Plains nations, celebrated in songs, dances, and visual art. The skills of horsemanship became a consistent mark of prowess and cultural identity. Similarly, the consistent use of European trade goods brought by new transport methods influenced indigenous material culture, leading to new forms of artistry and adaptation. In contemporary times, indigenous artists and storytellers consistently use modern transport to share their traditions with wider audiences, traveling to festivals, museums, and educational institutions globally. This consistent movement ensures that indigenous cultures continue to thrive and adapt, finding new ways to transmit their enduring values related to land, community, and the profound meaning of movement. The consistent sharing of these cultural expressions across distances reinforces their enduring legacy. As our extensive exploration of the evolution of transport concludes, we can now review the methodical progression of human movement and its far-reaching influences. We began by examining the earliest forms of human displacement, driven by fundamental needs, and have systematically traced this evolution through various stages, observing how consistent patterns of innovation and adaptation emerged over vast stretches of time. Our journey started with the simple, rhythmic acts of walking and carrying. These foundational methods established the most direct relationship between human beings and the landscape, a consistent rhythm of steps and sustained effort. The gradual understanding of how to move goods and people, even in small increments, laid the groundwork for all subsequent developments. We saw how even rudimentary solutions, like bundles and the use of basic human chains, allowed for the systematic movement of items driven by a consistent need for resources. The subtle sounds of early movement, from footsteps on earth to the gentle lapping of water against early rafts and dugout canoes, marked the initial rhythms of organized travel. Following this, we observed the integration of animal power, a significant adaptation that consistently expanded human capabilities for movement. The domestication of animals like donkeys, oxen, camels, and horses introduced reliable sources of propulsion for carrying loads and pulling carts. The endurance of the donkey, the steady strength of the ox, the consistent pace of the camel across challenging terrains, and the speed of the horse all contributed to more efficient and consistently predictable overland journeys. This phase of development fundamentally altered the scale and consistency of trade, allowing for goods to traverse longer distances with increased reliability.
The rhythmic sounds of hooves and creaking carts became new, consistent elements in the soundscape of travel.
The invention of the wheel marked a pivotal, yet systematically applied advancement. From solid wooden discs to spoked wheels, this innovation consistently reduced friction, transforming dragging into the more efficient motion of rolling. We observed how the wheel led to the development of carts and wagons, enabling the consistent movement of heavier loads and shaping the emergence of organized road networks. The consistent construction of paved roads, like those of the Roman Empire, facilitated predictable travel and communication, reinforcing political control and economic exchange across vast territories. The steady rhythm of wheels on these surfaces became a defining characteristic of advanced ancient societies. Our analysis then transitioned to water transport, noting its consistent efficiency for moving large volumes of goods and people. From rafts and dugout canoes, we traced the development to sophisticated sailing vessels that harnessed the consistent power of the wind. The predictable flow of rivers and currents, combined with an understanding of navigation, allowed for sustained voyages across seas and oceans, underpinning global trade and exploration. The systematic knowledge of tides and celestial patterns transformed oceanic travel into a series of calculated, consistent passages. The advent of the railway system introduced a new level of controlled, linear motion, fundamentally altering overland transport in the 19th century. The consistent efficiency of steel wheels on steel rails, powered by steam locomotives, allowed for the mass movement of goods and people, fueling industrial growth and national integration. Railway networks, with their fixed schedules and precise construction, established a highly ordered and consistently reliable system of movement. The rhythmic sounds of the trains became emblematic of a new era of predictable progress. After this, the automobile brought a unique dimension of individual mobility. Its development, driven by the internal combustion engine, offered personal freedom of movement on existing road networks. The consistent refinement of vehicle design and manufacturing processes, notably the assembly line, allowed for the widespread and predictable production of cars. This led to a reshaping of urban and suburban landscapes and fostered new cultural patterns centered around personal transport. The constant presence of cars on roads, moving in consistent patterns, became a familiar element of daily life. Our journey then ascended to air travel, from early hot air balloons and dirigibles to heavier-than-air flight pioneers like the Wright brothers, culminating in the jet age. The development of jet engines, operating on consistent principles of thrust, allowed for consistently faster and higher flights, transforming global connectivity. Air traffic control systems, with their precise communication and established flight paths, ensure an ordered and consistently safe movement in the skies. The systematic nature of air travel, from takeoff to landing, is a testament to meticulous planning and adherence to protocols.
The concept of intermodal coordination highlighted how different transport modes consistently work together, exemplified by the predictable journey of shipping containers across ships, trains, and trucks. This standardization ensures a continuous and consistent flow of goods across global supply chains. We also examined public transport systems, buses, trains, and streetcars, which provide consistent, scheduled movements for large populations within urban areas, offering a rhythmic consistency to daily commutes. Looking to the future of mobility, we noted the consistent refinement of transport principles with electric vehicles, autonomous vehicles, high-speed rail, and even hyperloop systems. These advancements aim for greater efficiency, sustainability, and above all, consistent reliability, ensuring that movement continues to be a dependable and increasingly automated aspect of human existence. The consistent integration of technology promises an even more ordered future for travel. Beyond the mechanics of movement, we systematically examined transport's consistent influences on various facets of human society. In education, transport consistently shaped knowledge dissemination. Early movements allowed for the gradual spread of oral traditions and skills. Later, roads and railways facilitated the consistent travel of scholars and educational materials, expanding access to learning. Modern air travel and digital networks enable consistent global academic exchange, ensuring a continuous flow of information across distances. The consistent ability to gather and distribute knowledge has always been tied to the means of movement. Technological advancement has been consistently intertwined with transport's evolution. The wheel's consistent rotation influenced other mechanical inventions. The Industrial Revolution saw steam engines and assembly lines, initially driven by transport needs, leading to broader innovations in metallurgy and manufacturing processes. Aviation's demands spurred consistent breakthroughs in aerodynamics and navigation. Each advancement in movement required and in turn inspired consistent technological refinement. The economic impact of transport has been consistently profound, from enabling early specialization and localized trade to facilitating the expansion of global markets via consistent shipping routes and railways. Transport has systematically reduced costs and increased efficiency in the movement of goods. The automobile decentralized economic activity, and air cargo revolutionized the consistent movement of time-sensitive goods. The consistent flow of goods enabled by predictable logistics underpins the global economy. In political systems, transport has consistently played a role in state consolidation
and global governance. Roman roads ensured consistent military and administrative control. Railways fostered national unity by enabling consistent internal movement of forces and information. Modern air travel facilitates consistent international diplomacy and economic interdependence. The consistent ability to move power and resources has always been a fundamental element in political stability. Transport's shaping of culture has been subtle but consistent. Early nomadic movements influenced cultural practices tied to portability and adaptability. Trade routes led to consistent cultural exchanges and linguistic blending. Maritime travel shaped unique coastal traditions. Railways fostered national identity and new senses of punctuality. The automobile promoted a consistent culture of individual mobility. Air travel consistently facilitates global cultural exchange, creating a more interconnected world. The consistent movement of people and ideas continuously reshapes shared experiences. Finally, we explored indigenous perspectives on movement. For many indigenous cultures, movement was intrinsically linked to interconnectedness with the land, cultural knowledge, and spiritual continuity. Songlines, riverine transport via canoes, and dog-pulled sleds exemplify consistent methods tied to specific ecosystems and traditional knowledge. The arrival of the horse led to consistent adaptations in mobility and hunting. Modern transport, while sometimes disruptive, has also been consistently integrated to support traditional practices and cultural revitalization. This consistent pattern of adaptation highlights an enduring, unchanging relationship with movement and place-based understanding. The infrastructure and navigation systems have served as consistent underlying frameworks. Roads, railways, air traffic control, and ports provide fixed pathways and predictable guidance for all modes of transport. From ancient maps to modern GPS, the consistent ability to determine and follow a course has transformed travel into a reliable, measurable experience. Traffic management systems, with their consistent rules and signals, ensure an orderly and efficient flow across all transport networks. The evolution of transport is not a collection of isolated inventions, but a single, continuous, and highly consistent narrative of human ingenuity adapting to the unchanging need for movement. Each advancement, from the simple act of walking to the complex operation of global logistics, has been a methodical step in refining efficiency, expanding reach, and establishing predictable systems.
What becomes evident from this extensive journey is the pervasive theme of consistency. Whether in the repetitive rhythm of a gait, the predictable turning of a wheel, the steady pull of a sail, the consistent hum of an engine, or the unwavering adherence to a flight path, transport's core identity is its reliability. It is through this very consistency that vast distances are overcome. Resources are distributed, ideas are exchanged, and societies are connected. The profound impact on transport on education, technology, economy, politics, and culture stems precisely from its predictable nature. It provides a stable foundation upon which complex human endeavors can consistently rely. It is not the dramatic surge, but the persistent flow, the unchanging routine, the systematic progression that has truly shaped our world. So, as the detailed tapestry of global journeys recedes into the quiet of your mind, allow the consistent rhythms of its evolution to settle your thoughts. The very essence of transport, in its methodical and reliable unfolding across history, offers a comforting reflection on order and progression. Let this final impression of its unwavering consistency guide you gently to a state of profound and undisturbed rest. Thank you for joining us tonight on Bore to Bed. We truly appreciate you choosing to spend your valuable time with our detailed explorations. We hope this comprehensive journey through the evolution of transport has provided the perfectly consistent backdrop for your transition to sleep. Remember, for more wonderfully systematic stories designed to lull you into deep slumber, be sure to subscribe to Bore to Bed. Sweet dreams, and may your journeys always proceed with predictable precision.